Hi John, hey Jaguars. I hope you enjoyed the first 3 chapters of So Be It. And today we're going to continue with chapter 4 and chapter 5. Chapter 4 is called Sooth. S-O-O-F. When Bernadette first started coming to our apartment, she said it was practically empty. There were a few pieces of mismatched furniture, some clothes hanging in the closets, odds and ends in the kitchen drawers and cupboards, a couple of baby things, a box of juji fruits, but not much else. She looked around for anything that might have a name on it, a letter or an address book, a purse or a wallet, but there was nothing. She said it was as though Mama and I had dropped out of the sky. I'm not sure if Bernadette was a natural-born pack rat or if it was out of necessity that she never threw anything away. Until the time I was old enough to go downstairs to take out the trash, if something didn't fit down the disposal or couldn't be cut up and flushed down the toilet, she pretty much had to hang on to it. She had enough furniture crammed into her apartment to furnish Mama's and my place easily, without ever making a dent in her own clutter. A lot of what we lived with was patched up or held together with duct tape, but as Bernadette said, there was no sense in tossing stuff out that was PF. Perfectly fine. Bernie asked Mama lots of questions after she found us, but even if Mama had understood the questions, Bernie quickly learned she didn't have the words to answer them. The only information Bernadette could manage to get out of Mama was our names, Heidi and So Be It. That's what Mama told Bernie her name was, So Be It. Bernadette couldn't believe that was right, so she asked her again and again, but the answer was always the same, So Be It. Well, Mama couldn't read or write her name, so it was Bernie who decided how it should look on paper. Every person deserves to have a proper first and last name, and if there's a middle initial to plunk down between them, all the better, she said. So Mama became So Be It. And her last name, strange though it was, became my last name as well. It. When I turned 5, which is about the time most kids start kindergarten, I didn't go to school. Bernadette decided to keep me home and teach me herself. I never wondered why I wasn't doing what all the other 5-year-olds were doing because I didn't know. I didn't know any other 5-year-olds. In fact, I didn't know any kids at all, except for Xander. Xander was short for Alexander. He was a few years older than me, and he was fat. Bernadette told me it was rude to call people fat, even if they were. But considering what he called me the first time I met him, I felt fine about it. I was downstairs taking out the trash. "What's a retard?" I asked Bernadette when I got back upstairs. "Well, in music it's pronounced retard, short for the Italian ritardando, which means slowing down," she said. "Well, what does it mean when it's pronounced retard and somebody says it about you in English?" I asked. "Well, it usually means the person saying it is a dimwit." "Is Xander downstairs a dimwit?" I asked. "I expect he is," she said. Truthfully, Xander wasn't very smart, and because my first impression of him was that he wasn't very nice either, I avoided him. Then, one day on another trash run, I came across him sitting on the stairs, and out of the blue, he offered me a Twinkie from one of the 2-packs he was eating. Bernadette didn't allow junk food in the house. She said it was a waste of money, and besides that, bad for your gray matter. Xander loved junk food. The junkier the better, which kind of proved her point, I guess. Besides junk food, Xander also liked to squish ants between his fingers. But most of all, he liked to talk. Over time, we developed a little ritual, Xander and I. We would meet downstairs every afternoon at 3:15 when he got home from school and hang out on the front stoop. There were a lot of things I didn't really like about Xander. He talked rough, he didn't always smell good, and I didn't like what he did to those ants. But I did like to listen to him talk. The way it worked with us was that as soon as we sat down, Xander would give me a handful of whatever junk he was eating that day to keep me busy. Then he'd launch into one of his stories. He loved to tell stories. He had some favorites that he'd tell over and over, like the one about finding a bag of $100 bills on the sidewalk and burying it in a butter cookie tin out in the woods. He also liked to brag about his father being a war hero. Upstairs with Bernadette, talking was easy. We told each other what we thought or how we felt or something interesting we'd figured out. Words traveled in straight lines. But when Xander talked, 9 times out of 10, he was bending the truth to within an inch of its life. And after each whopping fib, he'd say, "It's the God's truth, swear on my mother's spit." And I would solemnly nod to let him know I believed every word he had said. I was no dummy. I knew Xander was lying like a rug, but I didn't want him to stop. I was fascinated by his fibbing. Bernadette had told me that people lie when the truth is too hard to admit. So each day as I sat there nibbling my snack with my eyes locked tight on Xander's face, I was only listening with half my brain. The other half was busy trying to figure out the truth. Xander was in the 3rd grade when I met him. He went to Scarlet Elementary over on the south side. When Bernadette decided not to send me to school, she told me if anyone ever asked, I was to tell them I was being homeschooled. We had school every morning at the kitchen table. In the very beginning, Mama would sit with us too, especially when we were working on letters. But after a while, I'd learned all my letters and my numbers too, so we moved on to other things. Mornings became Mama's coloring time. Bernadette bought Mama all kinds of coloring books, and we had a big shoebox full of crayons. Mama loved to color. She didn't stay inside the lines, and she only used one color for each drawing. But she was happy, and it kept her occupied while Bernie taught me. "Blue!" Mama would call out to us from the other room each time we finished a drawing. Each time she finished a drawing. "You go, Picasso!" Bernie would call back. Mama used all the crayons, yellow and pink and my favorite color, purple, but no matter what color she used, she called it blue. Sometimes I worried that maybe the reason Mama only had one word for colors was that she only saw one color. It made me sad to think that Mama's world might have no pink or yellow or purple in it. But I knew Mama loved me, even though she didn't have words to tell me. So I decided the same thing was true of the colors. Just because she didn't have words for them didn't mean she didn't see them. In the afternoons, after school, Mama and I often went out to do shopping and run errands. Bernadette would give us a list of things to do. Some of the words on the list would be spelled out in block letters: bread, milk, eggs. But if there was something I couldn't read yet, like juji fruits, she'd draw a little picture of it for me. At first, we could only go places that didn't require crossing any streets, because neither Mama or I knew how to do that safely. Later, Bernadette made us practice street crossing by laying towels across the kitchen floor and teaching us to look both ways before we walked over them. Mama was happy to hold my hand, and she looked both ways too, but I could tell she didn't know what she was supposed to be looking for. I got to know some nice people outside. The cashiers at the grocery store, Frances and Kathy, and later the librarian at the public library, Mrs. Koppelman. Sometimes when Mama and I were out, we would see kids who looked like they might be about my age, and I remember thinking that it would have been nice to play with them. But whenever we stopped in the park to swing or to sit on the bench and feed breadcrumbs to the squirrels, the kids would whisper, move away from us. You couldn't really tell about Mama's brain just from looking at her, but it was obvious as soon as she spoke. She had a very high voice, like a little girl, and she only knew 23 words. I know this for a fact because we kept a list of the things Mama said tacked to the inside of the kitchen cabinet. Most of the words were common ones like good and more and hot, but there was one word only my mother said, sooth. What do you think it means when she says it? I would ask Bernadette. Only your mama knows that, she'd tell me each time I asked. That word, sooth, became like a little burr sticking in my head, pricking me so I couldn't forget it was there. I found myself thinking about it more and more. Well, there must be some way to find out what it means, I'd say to Bernie. Not necessarily, Heidi. Well, it has to mean something or Mama wouldn't say it. She knows what it means. Maybe so, but that doesn't mean that you ever will. Believe me, Heidi, there are some things in life a person just can't know. The thing is, I didn't believe her, and a lot was going to happen before I would.